Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Randana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Randana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravajakacharya Ashtotartha Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravajakacharya Ashtotartha Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavindra Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Excuse me for a second here. Okay. You have to check this out later. I think it got dropped, probably. So, we're starting a new chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 8th day of January 2025 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are beginning chapter 18, conclusion, the perfection of renunciation, page 661. Text number 1. Yeah. Hari Bol. Okay, Hari Bol. Okay, text 1. Arjuna Vacha Sannyasasya Mahabaho Tattvam Ichchami Veditum Tyagasya Chavrishikesha Pritak Keshinisudana. Arjuna Vacha Sannyasasya Mahabaho Tattvamichchami Veditum Tyagasya Chavrishikesha Pritak Keshinisudana. Arjuna Vacha Sannyasasya Mahabaho Tattvamichchami Veditum Tyagasya Charushikesha Pritak Keshinisudana. Arjuna Uvacha Sannyasasya Mahabaho Tattvamichchami Veditum Tyagasya Chavrishikesha Pritak Keshinisudana. Arjuna Vacha Sannyasasya Mahabaho Tattvamichchami Veditum Tyagasya Charushikesha Pritak Keshinisudana. Arjuna Uvacha Sannyasasya Mahabaho Tattvamichchami Veditum Tyagasya Chavrishikesha Pritak Keshinisudana. Arjuna Uvacha Sannyasasya Mahabaho Tattvamichchami Veditum Tyagasya Charushikesha Pritak Keshinisudana. Arjuna Uvacha Sannyasasya Mahabaho Tattvamichchami Veditum Tyagasya Chavrishikesha Pritak Keshinisudana. Anyone online? Word by words, Arjuna Uvacha, Arjuna said, Sannyasasya, of renunciation, Mahabaho, O mighty-armed one, Tattvam, the truth, Ichchami, I wish, Veditum, to understand, Tyagasya, of renunciation, Cha, also, Rishikesha, or master of the senses, Pritak, differently, Keshinisudana, O killer of the Keshi demon. Translation. Arjuna said, O mighty-armed one, I wish to understand the purpose of renunciation, Tyaga, and of the renounced order of life, sannyas, O killer of the Keshi demon, master of the senses. Purport. Actually, the Bhagavad Gita is finished in 17 chapters. The 18th chapter is a supplementary summarization of the topics discussed before. In every chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna stresses that devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of life. The same point is summarized in the 18th chapter as the most confidential path of knowledge. In the first 6 chapters, stress was given to devotional service. Yoginam api sarvesham. Of all yogis or transcendentalists, one who always thinks of me within himself is best. In the next 6 chapters, pure devotional service and its nature and activity were discussed. In the third 6 chapters, knowledge, renunciation, the activities of material nature and transcendental nature, and devotional service were described. It was concluded that all acts should be performed in conjunction with the Supreme Lord, represented by the words Om Tat Sat, which indicate Vishnu, the Supreme Person. The third part of the Bhagavad Gita has shown that devotional service and nothing else is the ultimate purpose of life. This has been established by citing past acharyas and the Brahma Sutra, the Vedanta Sutra. Certain impersonalists consider themselves to have a monopoly on the knowledge of Vedanta Sutra. But actually the Vedanta Sutra is meant for understanding devotional service, for the Lord himself is the composer of the Vedanta Sutra, and he is its knower. That is described in the 15th chapter. In every chapter, every Veda, devotional service is the objective. In every scripture, every Veda, devotional service is the objective. That is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. As in the second chapter, a synopsis of the whole subject matter was described. In the 18th chapter also, the summary of all instruction is given. The purpose of life is indicated to be renunciation and attainment of the transcendental position above the 3 material modes of nature. Arjuna wants to clarify the 2 distinct subject matters of the Bhagavad Gita, namely renunciation, tyaga, and the renounced order of life, sannyas. Thus he is asking the meaning of these 2 words. 2 words used in this verse to address the Supreme Lord, Rishikesha and Keshi Nishudana, are significant. Rishikesha is Krishna, the master of all senses, who can always help us attain mental serenity. Arjuna requests him to summarize everything in such a way that he can remain equipoised. Yet he has some doubts, and doubts are always compared to demons. He therefore addresses Krishna as Keshi Nishudana. Keshi was a most formidable demon who was killed by the Lord. Now Arjuna is expecting Krishna to kill the demon of doubt. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, tyaga, or sannyas. Sannyas, the sun, or the sat prefix, means complete. Just like we have sun, we have kirtan, and then we have sun kirtan, total kirtan, right? We have nyas, renunciation, and sannyas, total renunciation. So sannyasis are meant to be completely fixed in renunciation, subsisting on the minimal comforts in life and keeping body and soul together, and that's basically it. And keeping themselves in such a situation that they can maintain their renunciation of sex life and so forth. So that's the negative side. What about the positive side? With that as a basis, that renunciation, that vairagya and sannyas, they are meant to be personifications of bhakti, you see. That, in other words, where do they find their happiness, their bliss, their pleasure? It's not in the senses. Krishna is Rishikesha, he's the master of all the senses, and they personify that idea, that whatever they have, their own senses, whatever comes in their grasp, they are expert at engaging it in Krishna's service. And they're meant to preach and be fearless, as we learned in chapter 16. You remember those qualities at the beginning of the chapter. Those were the divine qualities, and they were meant for the sannyasis and then the grahastas and I think the kshatriyas and like that. So the first, you'll find that they emphasize renunciation and fearlessness, because you have to simply rely on Krishna for everything, you know, and have full faith in that. So that's going to be described, the perfection of renunciation. And here in the next verse, oh, okay, we just did the first one so far. So it describes sannyasa. This is Arjuna's question. And Krishna will answer and describe the perfection of it. And Prabhupada points out that this 18th chapter kind of summarizes the whole work, and we find at the end the essential instructions, the two verses 65 and 66, which will summarize the whole thing. Basically, Krishna says, okay, it's very, very good. I brought you to this point. Now just more or less forget what I just said, and just do these two things. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, bow down to me, and give up all other dharmas and surrender to me. Don't worry about sinful actions. I'll completely eradicate them, because that was what Arjuna's worry was in the first chapter, right? So everything is summarized there, and then you'll certainly go to Krishna in the previous verse says, which is what the whole point is. All right, let's go on. Text 2. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sanyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshanaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the giving up of activities that are based on material desire is what great learned men call the renounced order of life, or sannyas. And giving up the results of all activities is what the wise call renunciation, or tyaga. Purport. The performance of activities for results has to be given up. This is the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita. But activities leading to advanced spiritual knowledge are not to be given up. This will be made clear in the next verses. In the Vedic literature, there are many prescriptions of methods for performing sacrifice for some particular purpose. There are certain sacrifices to perform to attain a good son or to attain elevation to the higher planets, but sacrifices prompted by desires should be stopped. However, sacrifice for the purification of one's heart or for advancement in the spiritual science should not be given up. So this is the essence of it. This word, it's important to understand the difference between tyaga and vairagya. Tyaga literally means giving up. There's certain things we have to give up entirely. Most commonly, the 4 regs include things that we're giving up meat entirely, no more, you know. And so that's things you actually give up. But vairagya means is a ideal for the sannyasi, and we saw Prabhupada, of course, personify these qualities. Is that even in the midst of all the temptations and the attractions, there's no attraction. It no longer appeals to you because you're completely satisfied serving Krishna and thinking about Krishna. And we saw that personified, of course, in Haridas Thakur, you know, that he was tempted. And there's 2 kinds of temptation. One is to try to enjoy, and the other is to try to avoid pain. See, both sides have to be, and he personified both. With the enjoyment side, when he was tempted by the prostitute, and instead of you know, he tricked her a little bit, right? So oh, fine, we'll be together, but just let me finish my rounds. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Sun rises, rounds are still going on. Oh boy, you know. So she goes back to the what was his name? I forget. Ramchandra Khan, I think. And he said, "What happened? What happened?" And so she says, "Be patient. You know, we promise that we'll be together, and let me be with him one time, and then you come with your people and arrest him and everything." All right. So she goes back the next night, and you know, I'm so sorry I couldn't finish my rounds last night, but I'm almost done. So you just sit there and listen. You know. So she's listening and she's bored. So what is he going to do? Might as well chant. So she starts chanting, gets purified. You know, and then the sun rises again. You know, oh boy. So by the 3rd time she realizes he's a great soul, she surrenders to him. I said, "Please forgive me." You know, she says, "I knew the whole plan. You know, I just stayed here to save you. So you just keep chanting. You know, give everything to the Brahmins." And she became a great devotee, a famous devotee. On the other side, of course, he was arrested, for having converted into a Hindu. It only goes the other way, with the Patans in charge, right? So Haridas said, well, look, so many of the Hindus have been converted into Muslim. What's one Muslim converted? What's the big deal? Said, oh, you're arguing with me? Okay, take him out. Beat him to death. So, all right. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. So they're beating and he's chanting. He's not feeling anything. Lord Chaitanya is on his back. There's a whole thing. So he's not feeling anything, and they usually one or two marketplaces, and they expire. Criminals. But he wasn't. Not only wasn't he expiring, he wasn't crying out in pain. He didn't seem to be had damage at all. He was beating. Finally, their arms are getting tight, and they're in all anxiety. They start, really. And Haridas says, "What's the matter?" He says, "Oh, if you don't die, we're going to get executed." He said, "Oh, no problem, I'll die." So he falls down into samadhi, and he seems to be dead. So they bring back what they think is the corpse, and say, "Well, what should we do with him? Should we bury him here on the bank of the river?" He said, "No. It'll become a place of pilgrimage." The Qazi says, "So throw him in the river." So they threw Haridas, what they thought was a corpse, in the river. He comes out of samadhi and swims across. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Said, okay, from now on you can do whatever you want. Actually, that was the deal. If you survived, then you could do it. So he personified the tolerance and detachment both on the negative and the positive side. In other words, he wasn't tempted to enjoy, and he wasn't freaked out by so-called suffering. He just merged into what is usual meditation, and he was protected. So that's the super ideal. And here Krishna is describing kaminam kamanam nyasam. There's the nyas in sannyas, renunciation of activities that are motivated by personal desire. Motivation is the whole thing. That's the whole, that we're to change your motivation for everything you do. Minimize the motivations based on just bodily necessities that you have to fulfill. Okay, that's there. But any, sense gratification, plans for enjoyment, that's nyas, that's renunciation. That's the vairagya. So that's the first line. Sannyasam kaviyo vidu, the kavis know that as sannyas. And then the other thing is sarvakarma palatyagam, to give up the fruits of whatever you may gain, sarvakarma palatyagam, prahas tyaga vachakshana. So the two things, one is sannyas and the other is tyaga. So renunciation, the first one is based on detachment, vairagya. And tyaga means literally to give up things that are impediments to devotional service, and that includes all of the fruits that may accrue to by your work. You give it up. Like a sannyasi, he may have get some donation, but immediately he uses it to travel somewhere or spend it for Krishna somehow. Prabhupada was the ideal of that. He came with no money, and he had his books, so he was selling his books and supporting himself that way. He had some shelter with Dr. Mishra and in Philadelphia and in Butler, Pennsylvania. But then when he came to New York, he's living 26 Second Avenue and depending on his, the students. And so a couple of them had jobs, okay, and you'll help support the whole ashram. So Prabhupada was a perfect sannyasi in showing all of these qualities. Okay, should we go on? All right. Tyajam dosha vadityeke karma praho manishinaha yagyadana tapaka karma natyajam iti chapare. Okay, before we go on, remember these three words were there from the last chapter. Sacrifice, charity, and austerity or penance. Those shouldn't be given up. Some learned men declare that all kinds of fruitive activities should be given up as faulty, yet other sages maintain that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should never be abandoned. Purport. There are many activities in the Vedic literature which are subjects of contention. For instance, it is said that an animal can be killed in a sacrifice, yet some maintain that animal killing is completely abominable. Although animal killing in a sacrifice is recommended in the Vedic literature, the animal is not considered to be killed. The sacrifice is to give a new life to the animal. Sometimes the animal is given a new animal life after being killed in the sacrifice, and sometimes the animal is promoted immediately to the human form of life. But there are different opinions among the sages. Some say that animal killing should always be avoided, and others say that for a specific sacrifice it is good. All these different opinions on sacrificial activity are now being clarified by the Lord himself. Okay. So just to reiterate, this idea that yajna, dana, and tapa karma should not be given up, and that'll be confirmed by Krishna in the next few verses. Nishchayam shuname tatra tyage bharata sattama tyago hi purushat vyagra trivadasam prakirtitaha. O best of the Bharatas, now hear my judgment about renunciation. O tiger among men, renunciation is declared in the scriptures to be of three kinds. Purport. Although there are differences of opinion about renunciation, here the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, gives his judgment, which should be taken as final. After all, the Vedas are different laws given by the Lord. Here the Lord is personally present, and his word should be taken as final. The Lord says that the process of renunciation should be considered in terms of the modes of material nature in which it is performed. Yajna tapa karma natyajam karyameva tat yajyo danam tapaschaiva pavanani manishinam. Acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. Purport. The yajnas, or sacrifices, are generally performed for the advancement of human society. There are many purificatory processes for advancing a human being to spiritual life. The marriage ceremony, for example, is considered to be one of these sacrifices. It is called Vivaha Yajna. Should a sannyasi who is in the renounced order of life and who has given up his family relations encourage the marriage ceremony? The Lord says here that any sacrifice which is meant for human welfare should never be given up. Vivaha Yajna, the marriage ceremony, is meant to regulate the human mind so that it may become peaceful for spiritual advancement. For most men, this Vivaha Yajna should be encouraged even by persons in the renounced order of life. Sannyasis should never associate with women, but that does not mean that one who is in the lower stages of life, a young man, should not accept a wife in the marriage ceremony. All prescribed sacrifices are meant for achieving the Supreme Lord. Therefore, in the lower stages, they should not be given up. Similarly, charity is for the purification of the heart. If charity is given to suitable persons, as described previously, it leads one to advanced spiritual life. And just one note, famously, Prabhupada performed the marriage ceremony for his disciples. Now, this was not done in India by sannyasis, and Prabhupada was criticized by that, you know. But he saw that this was essential for preaching. So many of his students came, and they had girlfriends and so forth, you know. And he knew that this was not going to work in devotional life, you know, because it leads to illicit sex and so forth. So he encouraged them to get married, and they did get married. Well, who's going to marry him? I mean, perform the marriage ceremony. He did that, understanding that this may have been a little breach of etiquette, but it was essential for establishing them firmly in devotional service so that they could then carry on the movement, which they did. So many of the married disciples were essential for the preaching, especially and most famously those three couples who went to England, who went to the UK in 1968. Shyamsundar and Malati, Mukunda and Janaki, and Guru Das and Yamuna. And they met George Harrison, which is like hitting the lottery for preaching. He's one of the most famous persons in the world, you know. And they were able to make records, which then became very popular. It was just huge. All because they went, you know, as couples. So Prabhupada proved that you need to, time, place, and circumstance, you sometimes need to compromise, you know, not any essential principles, but something like that, you know. The sannyasi never performs marriage. Well, in certain circumstances, he has to perform marriage for the higher good, for the higher purpose of spreading Krishna consciousness. Etan yapitu karmani Sangam tyakva palanicha kartavyani me parta nishchitam matamuttamam. All these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. They should be performed as a matter of duty, O son of Pita. That is my final opinion. And I need to ask you, Chad, to check the heater. I may have pressed the wrong button, because it doesn't feel very warm in here. You got your hood up, I got my hood up. Huh? I hope not. So, Krishna says, all these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. They should be performed as a matter of duty, O son of Pita. That is my final opinion. Purport. Although all sacrifices are purifying, one should not expect any result by such performances. In other words, all sacrifices which are meant for material advancement in life should be given up. But sacrifices that purify one's existence and elevate one to the spiritual plane should not be stopped. Everything that leads to Krishna consciousness must be encouraged. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also it is said that any activity which leads to devotional service to the Lord should be accepted. That is the highest criterion of religion. A devotee of the Lord should accept any kind of work, sacrifice, or charity which will help him in the discharge of devotional service to the Lord. So just one note on this. Prabhupada is referring, and he says that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, is referring to Canto 1, Chapter 2, text number 6. What is the supreme dharma? This was asked by the sages in Naimisharanya. And Sutta Goswami answered the question right at the beginning, second chapter of the first canto. You know, Prabhupada would quote these verses a lot. This and the next 17 verses, which we made into a book. Those verses, purports, and Prabhupada's selections from Prabhupada's commentary on it, called the Dharma, the Way of Transcendence. So what is that for? What is real Dharma? What is the best Dharma that can, what's the criterion that can fully satisfy the soul? Savai pung sang paro dharma yato bhakti radhokshaje. Ahaitukya pratayata yatma supasidati. Is very close to what Krishna is saying here. That is the supreme dharma for a human being, savai pung sang paro dharma, which engenders, which produces bhakti yoga. Yato bhakti radhokshaje, which means serving the transcendent Lord. Adhoksha is a word that means the transcendental one, beyond our the reach of our mind and senses. So what about that bhakti? Then it comes this immortal phrase, if you will, ahituki apratayata. It has to be free of material desire. This word hetu means cause, or it can mean motivation, material motivation. Yeah, we only do things because we're motivated to do them. So that motivation has to be free of selfish motivation. Motivation is there. When we serve Krishna, we're motivated. We're motivated to please Krishna. That's the proper motivation. And it has to, and to fully satisfy itself with a pratayata, we can't let anything interrupt it. It has to be without interruption. No gaps, as they used to say in Brooklyn. Then what the result is? Yayatma suprasidati. In this kind of bhakti, the atma, the soul, is completely satisfied and pleased. So right there he's setting it. Now how to get to that point is the next 15 verses described. You know. But that's what Prabhupada is referring to here. Bhagavatam said that any activity which leads to devotional service to the Lord should be accepted. That's the highest criterion of religion, dharma. He's studying this verse, although he didn't quote the verse. So that's that was integrated into ISKCON from the beginning. A devotee to the Lord should accept any kind of work. So there was, there were all kinds of things that devotees had never done before, going out and asking people for donations and taking books. This was revolutionary. You had all kinds of people with college degrees going out and doing things. Or, learning how, memorizing verses, going to the colleges and preach and all kinds of things like that. These are the kind of work and sacrifice that help to develop devotional service. Text 7. Niyatasya tu sannyasa karmano nopapadyate mohatasya parityagas tamasak parikirtitaha. Prescribed duties should never be renounced. If one gives up his prescribed duties because of illusion, such renunciation is said to be in the matter of ignorance, in the mode of ignorance. Purport: work for material satisfaction must be given up, but activities which promote one to spiritual activity, like cooking for the Supreme Lord and offering the food to the Lord and then accepting the food, are recommended. It is said that a person in the renounced order of life should not cook for himself. Cooking for oneself is prohibited, but cooking for the Supreme Lord is not prohibited. Similarly, a sannyasi may perform a marriage ceremony to help his disciple in the advancement of Krishna consciousness. This I explained it earlier. If one renounces such activities, it is to be understood that he is acting in the mode of darkness. So we covered this. Prescribed. Now, who are they prescribed by? That's the point. They're prescribed by Krishna in the Shastra, and specifically in time, place, and circumstances by the spiritual master, who is representing the Lord for the disciple. That's the whole idea of bhakti. That how often do we use the word surrender? Which is kind of a scary word. Surrender. Your own volition to. Yes, that's the point. Is that according to your faith. When you really develop faith in the spiritual master and Krishna, we're reading Krishna's words here. If you take these as the evidence for what you should understand about yourself in this world and God, and also how you should act in this world, then that's surrender. We're looking at, okay, I have to give this up. All right, that'll be surrender because I'm pretty attached, but I want to advance. And you get strength from being in the community of people who are doing it, you see? And then you see the benefit, how that attachment was an impediment, to my advancement. Now I'm free of that. I'm more attached to Krishna. I'm getting more attached to, which is the whole idea. Can't give up attachment. You have to, favorite word, sublimate it. Sublimate it. So the motive for acting, or even for sannyas, for giving up something, and there's so many ways it can be perverted. I really want to look renounced, Then I'll get more donations, because everyone, and the corruption of the religion, and we saw that people would come to America because yoga was getting popular and all this stuff, and they were simply this story from Amala Bhakta. Just write to me if you're interested. I'll send it to you. I mentioned this in I think Bhagavatam class I gave, or no, in a question and answer this morning, and Amala Bhakta. Sannyas Maharaj, now he's over 90. He's still there in LA, and he had an ashram in New York, a yoga ashram he was giving. When I wanted to start doing yoga to regain my health, I had serious hepatitis for a whole month. I was laid up. It was serious. All right, to come out, I was doing this whole diet. This one I became a vegetarian, But then what about, getting my strength back? So I looked in the yellow pages and I looked for yoga studios, and the closest one was in New York. I'm sitting in Hempstead, Long Island. So I started driving into the city, and there was this Shiva Prem Swami, I think he was called at the time. And I started doing the Hatha Yoga, asanas, and it was really helping me, the whole thing. So I stayed there. It was months I spent, going in there and doing that. But after some time, it was a little bit too. How should I put it? It was on the east side of New York. If you don't know Manhattan, Upper East Side, that's hoity-toity. That's where most of the money is. And everyone else in the class, middle-aged women trying to lose weight. There was no young people there, young men. So I found another ashram on the west side, Upper West Side. That's where a hipper section of the area. And that was more attractive. So I did that. I even went on a retreat because I had a job. I got 1 week off, paid vacation. So I went on a retreat into Connecticut, into the farmland, into the country land of Connecticut. And that was really important. We weren't allowed to talk for Maunam for a week. Your dreams get pretty vivid. Have you ever tried it?
Anyway, mostly couples had come, so they weren't talking for the first day, but after a while they were talking. But I didn't come with anybody, so I was really silent the whole time. But I was chanting. By that time I already had some beads. I was chanting. And I was reading Be Here Now. Have you ever seen that book? That's still being reprinted. And anyway, so that was an important kind of a watershed. And finally, the last day, there was a kirtan. It wasn't the Hare Krishna, though. Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram Om. That was the kirtan. It seemed like a concoction, but they were singing, I was attracted to singing. And when we got on the bus, we could go back to the city. Finally, we can talk, So I said, well, one thing I learned from this retreat, you know what I learned? That all you got to do is chant Hare Krishna. I think Lord Chaitanya smiled after that, and he led me. Eventually, I joined the temple. But it's so anyway. It's difficult, so this thing, when one performs a prescribed duty, prescribed by the Shastra, prescribed by the Guru, only because it ought to be done, the sense of duty, renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit. So that comes progressively. His renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. So it's always that you're not renouncing just for the sake of renunciation. You're renouncing one thing, but accepting another. We're renouncing, cheeseburgers and fries, but we're accepting samosas and halva. And one leads to hell, the other leads to the Vaikuntha. The point is that when you understand the philosophy, this was offered to Krishna with love and devotion, like that, right? So the attachment is there, but it's transferred. And that's what's wholesome about, Krishna consciousness. And it's possible. Otherwise, if you're, okay, we're going to have this, all we're going to eat is oatmeal and water. And if you can't do that, you got to go. How many, would the movement have taken off? No. Prabhupada knew. And it was exactly Lord Chaitanya's program. Chanting, 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 and then taking the opulent prasadam in the mood of, worship and Hare Krishna. All right, where were we? I lost my place. 8? 8. Dukkamityeva yat karma kaya klesha bhayatyajet sakrit varajasam tyagam naiva tyaga palang palam labet. Anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to have renounced in the mode of passion. Such action never leads to the elevation of renunciation. Purport. One who is in Krishna consciousness should not give up earning money out of fear that he is performing fruitive activities. If, by working, one can engage his money in Krishna consciousness, or if, by rising early in the morning, one can advance his transcendental Krishna consciousness, one should not desist out of fear or because such activities are considered troublesome. Such renunciation is in the mode of passion. The result of passionate work is always miserable. If a person renounces work in that spirit, he never gets the result of renunciation. So just, I think I mentioned this earlier, in the early days in the movement, several of his leading disciples were working. Specifically, Steve Guarino, who became Satsvarup Maharaj, and Bhakta Bruce, who became Brahmananda. They both worked for the city. One is a welfare worker, one is a teacher, I think, or something like that. So they wanted to know if they should stop working. He said, no, you keep working, but you give your salary to God, to Krishna. So they said, well, how can we do that? How can we give this? Just give the money to me and I'll give it to Krishna. So what did Prabhupada do with it? He said, oh, now I have my fare back to India. No. They bought a mimeograph machine so that they could make those first BTGs, bought the boga to make the prasadam to feed everybody, In other words, completely used in Krishna's service. And it's Krishna's energy to begin with, and you realize that. And there's a famous passage where there was one of these gurus, I think it was maybe Ramakrishna or somebody, where someone is offering him money, he says, no. And so Prabhupada said, if that was my case, I said, yeah, bring it all in. build temples and print books. That's unlimited expense, right? Yeah, and how much money had to be spent to build that Bombay temple? That was the first big temple Prabhupada was able to actually build from scratch, especially in India. And I remember years later, because when I joined, I had been working, so I had a little bank account, you know. I forget if it was 1,300 or 1,700, something like that, which was, you know, in 73, you can multiply that in 6 or 7, you know, today. See that much inflation. So I gave the whole thing. I was surrendering. And there was a famous devotee named Kirti Raj. I think he hasn't passed yet, but he pioneered in Russia later on, preaching there. And he was a part of the management there. So when he heard that I did, they said, "Oh, Bhakta Tom," you know. He put his arm around me. Thank you. It shit felt good. So what happened with that money is that the temple was collecting at that time to get a place in Manhattan. That was an idea. This was all in Brooklyn, you know, and Brooklyn was kind of out of the way. You know, a place in Manhattan would be really big. So they were collecting, and they were sending big collectors, and they were accumulating Lakshmi. So I learned later on that the whole, you know, the story of the Bombay land and that whole thing, how Prabhupada had to get that special part of land, and they tried to cheat him out of it. You know, one guy, you know, and so forth. And finally they got the land. So they had collected all this money, and then Prabhupada called up or wrote to him and said, "Okay, all that money, transfer the account in India. We're going to buy the land," you know. So it's like the devotee said, "Well, we've been collecting money for a place here." No, they said, "Okay, that's Prabhupada wants it. That's great," you know. So that money that I gave, it went to Bombay. I remember that when I first went there. Helped build the temple. Okay, so where were we? Did I just do 9? Yeah. No, I think I did 8. Yeah, one who gives up is troublesome. Then immediately that's fruitive. You know, it's too troublesome. I don't want to do it. It's said to have renounced in the mode of passion. That renunciation doesn't really help you. Okay. Karyam. Karyamityeva yat karma. Niyatam kriyate Arjuna. Sangam tyakva palam chaiva. Satyaga satpiko mataha. O Arjuna, when one performs his prescribed duty only because it ought to be done, and renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit, his renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. Purport. Prescribed duties must be performed with this mentality. One should act without attachment for the result. He should be disassociated from the modes of work. A man working in Krishna consciousness in a factory does not associate himself with the work in the factory, nor with the workers of the factory. He simply works for Krishna. And when he gives up the result for Krishna, he is acting transcendentally. So once again, you see that everything depends on the motivation for what you're doing. You know, why we can ask as you go through your day, why am I doing what I'm doing here? And that brings up this wonderful verse in the 11th canto. That's kind of the ideal. What is it? These verses are leaving me. I'm getting too old. Anyway, the gist is this. Whatever you do with your body, with your mind, with your words, with your intelligence, everything that you have, you see, one should feel, as one does it, one should really be conscious of this thought. Narayanade samarpayetat. I'm doing this as a sacrifice for Narayan. You know, I'm walking from point A to point B. Yes, I have to walk from A to point B so that I can then wipe down the table so they can have prasadam. I'm doing it for Krishna and for Krishna's devotees. In other words, you actually can do that throughout the day, then you're in a high state of consciousness. So Prabhupada, everything he did, you could see, he didn't just pick up the phone. He's picking up the phone. It's an act of love for Krishna. I'm going to glorify Krishna on the phone. I'll give you know what I mean? So that you can see that if someone lives on that level, you're always connected. Every breath, every thought, every activity is for Krishna. That's the ideal. So that we have to practice that. And this is such good instruction, you know. Is this in the mode of goodness or passion or ignorance here? You know, because just sleeping, that doesn't definitely mean the mode of ignorance. And now I'm taking rest for Krishna so that I can get keep my brain in order so tomorrow I can do all this service. You know. That's what Prabhupada, he's talking about the perfection of renunciation and all of these things. Okay, one more. Text 10. Nadveshta chukalam karma kushale nanusajjate tyagi sattva samavishto medavi chinna sangshayaha. The intelligent renouncer, situated in the mode of goodness, neither hateful of inauspicious work nor attached to auspicious work, has no doubts about work. Purport. A person in Krishna consciousness or in the mode of goodness does not hate anyone or anything which troubles his body. He does work in the proper place and at the proper time without fearing the troublesome effects of his duty. Such a person situated in transcendence should be understood to be most intelligent and beyond all doubts in his activities. Okay. So auspicious or inauspicious, I think really means that which is comfortable for you. You know, because for a devotee, comfortable work or uncomfortable work, all of it is auspicious because it's for Krishna. The whole point is that whether this is, you know, materially pleasing to do or materially unpleasing to do, they're both pleasing to Krishna. Therefore, I'm going to do it with the same enthusiasm and the same attention and stuff like that. That's the state we have to try to come to. It's not so easy. Okay, one more. Nahi deha bata shakyam tyaktum karmanya sheshataha yastu karma palatyagi tyagit yabadidiyate satyagit yabidiyate. Sorry. It is indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all activities. But he who renounces the fruits of action is called one who has truly renounced. Purport. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that one can never give up work at any time. Therefore, he who works for Krishna and does not enjoy the fruit of results, who offers everything to Krishna, is actually a renouncer. There are many members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness who work very hard in their office, or in the factory, or some other place, and whatever they earn, they give to the society. Such highly elevated souls are actually sannyasis and are situated in the renounced order of life. It is clearly outlined here how to renounce the fruits of work and for what purpose food should be renounced. Now, I can't help thinking, because I know how this book was put together. Prabhupada was dictating these, purports in the beginning of the movement in '67, in '66. So I think what he's thinking here of those is precisely those devotees who had jobs who were giving their whole paycheck, highly elevated souls. Well, we have time for one more. Anishtamish, no? Oh, we have a question or a comment.
Hare Krishna. Yesterday I was going to ask a question, but we didn't have time. Is it possible to go back at all to? Because we didn't do a review of the last chapter.
We didn't do a review of the last chapter. Okay, I'll try to answer your question. Go ahead.
Okay, so the chapter is called The Divisions of Faith. There's this one part, it says Shraddha, or faith, originally comes out of the mode of goodness. So I was thinking about the chapter in whole, and after we went over it, and et cetera, that is it more about how the modes influence faith rather than the divisions of faith themselves? Is you know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to here, that faith originally comes out of the mode of goodness, because right at the beginning of the chapter, text 2, there's 3 different kinds of faith according to the mode, Sattviki, Rajasi, and Tamasi. See, the thing is, you have to understand, these modes, they affect us. The world itself is, I mean, that piece of wood is not in any mode. It's not conscious. It's just sitting there. But how we relate to that piece of wood can be said in different modes. You know what I mean? It's all in the mind.
Sure.
So that's why, the faith, what you have faith in, like, People have faith in ghosts and spirits. When I was in Miami, we had people visit from Brazil, and you know, they would tell us, they themselves were devotees, but they would tell us about how, yeah, there's a whole culture there. People go out into the forest and they offer to the who they think is the ghost in the tree. They offer liquor and they have rituals, and it's all totally mode of ignorance, because that's in the mind. But they have faith that they get benefit from it, you know. But that faith is faith in something that's dark, and it will take you down. I mean, faith is an inevitable concomitant of life. I always point out, you know, you're driving down Grand 40 miles an hour. They go 40, 50 miles an hour. And they see the green light. Okay, I can make the light, you know. And they have faith that this light is red. This one is red, right? Yeah. But, you know, that's misplaced faith. I mean, it doesn't help you to transcend anything. It keeps you. But faith is there. People have faith. And the problem is they have faith in things that eventually betray them. They're betrayed. You know, whether we just went through a political season, all kinds of people are saying, I've been cheated. I had faith. You know, they use that word faith. But I voted. Now let's just see. The price of eggs are still so high, you know. In other words, so that's mode of ignorance.
But is it the modes that are affecting one's faith rather than them being divisions themselves? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
The
faith itself is not in a different mode. It's a person having the faith who's in the mode, and you can see by what the faith is in and how it causes them to act. Oh, yeah, this is faith in the mode of ignorance. Faith in the mode of goodness will bring you closer to God, to Krishna. That's the thing. So yeah, that's how it works. All right, we've come to that time. I have to do at least one poem. Okay. So this one you've heard before, but just like we've heard Hare Krishna before, but it's ever first. Kama dinam katina katita palita durnideshas tesham jata mayana karunanattapano prashantihi utsrijaitan hadiyarupate sampratam labdha buddhis tvamayata kshadanam abhayam mam niyung svatmadasye. In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy. Yet on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.